Is there a specific amount of time we should spend in the gym? Well, our workout duration will depend on several different factors and therefore might be a little different for everyone. The first and probably most influential factor determining how long a workout takes is the total number of sets performed in the session. With all else being equal, the number of sets performed is directly proportionate to the workout duration. In other words, fewer total sets means a shorter workout, while more sets means a longer workout. So the question is, how many sets should we perform per session? Well, this is mostly determined by total weekly volume, or the total number of sets performed for each muscle group per week. From what we currently understand, training a muscle with more volume tends to produce superior growth, but seems to follow a diminishing returns response. So more is usually better, but probably not as additionally beneficial. In most cases, significant diminishing returns start to exist when training a muscle beyond around 20 sets per week. So based on this relationship, the amount of volume you train with is down to personal preference. This is mostly going to be determined by the amount of time and effort you are feasibly willing to dedicate to lifting in the gym. For some, this might mean doing the minimum possible to maintain a healthy and functional body, while others who are trying to maximize muscle growth might try to train relevant muscles with up to 20 sets per week. The volume you train with might also differ between muscle groups. In general, you would probably want to train high priority muscles with more volume to achieve a faster rate of muscle growth, whereas lower priority muscles might be trained with less volume to achieve a slightly slower rate of growth. So once we have a decent idea of how much volume we want to train each muscle group with, the number of sets we perform within a single workout will also be influenced by training frequency. In other words, how many workouts will you perform per week? Essentially, frequency is a way to distribute volume. With total volume equated, more workouts per week means fewer sets per session, while fewer workouts per week means more sets per session. In most cases, the number of workouts in which you distribute your volume throughout the week doesn't seem to have much of an impact on muscle growth. For example, this study compared the effects of performing the same total weekly volume across 4 versus 2 workouts per week. 21 subjects with an average of 3.5 years lifting experience performed either one of the following workout routines for 9 weeks. One group trained 4 times per week with a total of 8 sets per session. The other group trained only 2 times per week, but with twice the volume of 16 total sets per session. So the total number of sets performed throughout the week was the same in both groups. All sets of all exercises were taken to failure somewhere within the 8 to 12 rep range in both groups. After 9 weeks, both groups experienced similar increases in lean mass of the legs, arms, and trunk with no significant differences between them. So the number of sets you perform within an individual workout is going to be a result of your total weekly volume combined for each muscle group divided by the number of workouts you perform per week. There doesn't seem to be much of a difference in muscle growth outcomes when performing more sets across fewer sessions versus fewer sets across more sessions, although it will impact the duration of each workout. Probably the second biggest determinant of how long your workouts last are rest periods. The majority of a typical strength or hypertrophy training session is spent resting as opposed to actually lifting. And how long we rest between sets will have a significant impact on total workout duration. For example, let's say we were to perform a total of 20 sets within a session, and let's assume each set takes 30 seconds to complete. This means the total time spent lifting equates to 10 minutes. If we were to rest 2 minutes between each set, this would be a total of 40 minutes spent resting. So our total workout duration would equate to roughly 50 minutes. If rest periods were shortened to 1 minute, we would spend 20 minutes resting for a total workout duration of 30 minutes. And if rest periods were extended to 3 minutes, we would spend 60 minutes resting for a total workout duration of 70 minutes. But how long should we rest to maximize muscle growth? This was explored in this systematic review, which aimed to assess the influence of rest periods on muscle growth. A total of 6 studies were included in the review, which compared muscle growth outcomes between interventions using rest periods of 1 minute or less versus anything greater than 1 minute. It was found that, on average, both shorter and longer rest periods were effective for building muscle, but longer rest periods tended to produce slightly superior growth. And to see the dose-response effect of rest periods on muscle growth, I plotted the data from each individual intervention from the studies in the systematic review and added a few more recent studies. The overall trend favoured longer rest periods, but it wasn't a very strong relationship. So essentially, resting too little seems to compromise muscle growth to some extent. However, resting too long might make your training sessions unnecessarily long for not much additional benefit. As a practical recommendation, resting somewhere between around 1 to 3 minutes between sets is probably going to provide a good balance between the hypertrophic stimulus and session duration. Some people might want to rest on the upper end of this range to maximize muscle growth, while others might decide to rest on the shorter end to maximize time efficiency. The next factor which can influence how long our workouts last is exercise selection. While this doesn't have as much of an impact as the number of sets we perform or how long we rest between sets, it can have somewhat of an impact on session duration. Some exercises take a longer duration to perform than others simply due to their nature. In general, compound free weight lifts where you can use a heavy load, such as squat, deadlift, and pull-up variations, tend to take a longer duration to complete for a couple of reasons. First is that they usually require a more extensive warm-up. You are able to lift heavier absolute loads, and the technical demands are higher, so it might take more warm-up sets and a greater psychological arousal to perform these exercises effectively. And second is that these exercises usually require longer rest periods. They have greater cardiorespiratory demands and involve a greater amount of total musculature, which will increase the time needed for performance to recover between sets. Alternatively, machine-based exercises or isolation lifts that you can't lift as much load with, such as calf raises, bicep curls, or lateral raises, are usually able to be completed in a shorter duration for the opposite reasons. You don't need as much of a warm-up, if at all, to perform these exercises, since the absolute loads used are lighter and they aren't very technically demanding. And rest periods between sets usually don't need to be as long since cardiorespiratory demands are lower and there is less total musculature involved in the exercise. So the exercises you perform during a workout can influence your total session duration. A workout which is comprised of multiple free weight compound lifts will usually take a longer duration to complete, while a workout with more machine-based isolation lifts will typically be completed within a shorter duration. The next factor influencing total session duration is your warm-up. This includes components such as a general warm-up, like walking or jogging on a treadmill, mobility exercises such as stretching, foam rolling, and self-massage, and specific warm-ups for certain exercises, such as performing warm-up sets for a lift. An extensive warm-up can take quite a while if lots of different components are included, and can significantly extend your session duration. But is a warm-up even necessary for your goals? Well, this research review aimed to establish time-efficient resistance training practices by manipulating many different variables. One component of a workout they explored was the warm-up. Based on the overall body of evidence, the authors concluded that general warm-ups don't seem to have any notable effects on lifting performance. Although a specific warm-up, in other words performing some warm-up sets, can have a small advantage at improving lifting performance, especially when training with heavy loads. And in terms of stretching, resistance training itself functions as an active form of flexibility training, often resulting in similar increases in range of motion compared with stretching. So unless specific mobility is a primary goal, additional stretching and mobility exercises are probably not necessary for strength and hypertrophy goals. So for the purposes of hypertrophy training, a few warm-up sets should be sufficient for free weight compound lifts performed at the beginning of the session. And for most machines or isolation lifts, a warm-up is probably not necessary at all, especially if they are performed later in the workout. However, for maximal strength training, a more extensive warm-up might be beneficial. Depending on the specific lift, some specific mobility exercises might be performed in order to comfortably achieve the required range of motion. Then, multiple progressive warm-up sets would be recommended to build up to a top working set. And if the exercise has a high skill requirement, such as calisthenic skills or Olympic weightlifting, some specialized dynamic preparatory exercises will likely be beneficial for coordination purposes. And in some cases, a warm-up is helpful to alleviate joint pain if you have certain joints that are irritated. This might include more warm-up sets, mobility exercises, or even rehab exercises if you are nursing an injury or trying to minimize the likelihood of injury. The next factor influencing how long our workouts last are the rep ranges we train with. Training with higher rep ranges obviously takes a little longer to complete each set, while training with lower rep ranges takes a little less time to complete each set. Although this isn't going to have a major influence on workout duration, it might have a small impact. For example, let's say we were to perform a total of 20 sets within a workout, resting 2 minutes between sets on average. If we lifted in the 5 to 10 rep range for every set, it might take an average of around 20 seconds to complete each set, making our total time spent lifting around 6 minutes and 40 seconds. With rest included, this would be a total workout duration of 46 minutes and 40 seconds. However, if we trained in the 15 to 20 rep range, it might take around 40 seconds to complete each set on average, making our total lifting time around 13 minutes and 20 seconds. So our total workout duration would be 53 minutes and 20 seconds. So not a huge difference, but certainly notable. But is there an advantage to working in certain rep ranges? This meta-analysis analyzed the body of evidence comparing the effects of different loads on muscle growth and strength gains. The researchers categorized interventions into those using light loads, defined as greater than a 15 rep max, moderate loads, defined as anything between a 9 to 15 rep max, and heavy loads, defined as an 8 rep max or heavier. For muscle growth, it was found that all load categories were effective for building muscle, with no specific advantage for either. No significant differences were found between light versus heavy loads, light versus moderate loads, and moderate versus heavy loads. However, when it came to strength gains, there was a clear advantage favoring heavier loads. Heavier loads were superior to light loads, moderate loads were superior to light loads, and heavy loads were superior to moderate loads. So depending on the goal of the exercise, you might decide to train with different rep ranges. As a practical guide, if you want to maximize strength gains, train with 5 reps or less. And for hypertrophy, you can train anywhere between around 5 to 20 reps, just making sure to take each set close to failure. Related to a few points we have touched on already, strength and skill-based training goals might require slightly longer workout durations. This is for a couple of different reasons. First is that rest periods will likely be longer. The most important consideration to maximize strength and skill goals is training quality. This might be to ensure you are lifting heavy to maximize strength, or to ensure high coordination for skill. So we would want to rest a little longer, usually at least 2 minutes, so that fatigue doesn't inhibit performance and coordination of subsequent sets. Second is that, as we mentioned, strength and skill training usually requires a more extensive warm-up. A warm-up can help to ensure you are moving smoothly through the required range of motion and maximize force production. This can improve the quality of strength and skill training. And the last factor influencing how long a workout lasts is the potential addition of cardio. It isn't necessary to perform cardio as a warm-up, although some people might want to add cardio either before or after a workout for the purposes of developing aerobic fitness or as a means to expend more energy. And quite clearly, adding cardio will increase your total workout duration. This is completely fine to do as long as you are willing to add additional time to your workouts. And just be aware that including cardio could potentially result in slightly inferior outcomes for some goals. This meta-analysis analyzed the influence of concurrent resistance and aerobic training on hypertrophy strength and explosive strength. For hypertrophy, there was no significant effect of adding cardio. For lower body strength, resistance training alone seemed to be a little better for strength gains, but it wasn't significant. And for explosive strength and power, resistance training was clearly superior to concurrent training. So just be aware that adding cardio to the same workout might inhibit lower body strength gains and will probably be detrimental for explosive strength development. This doesn't mean you will see strength and power losses, it just means that your rate of progress might be a little slower. So if maximizing lower body strength or power development is a primary goal of yours, then it might be worth separating cardio from resistance training by at least a few hours, and ideally perform cardio on separate days to resistance training to minimize the interference effect. So we have now discussed most of the variables that will influence the duration of a workout. Therefore, our workout duration will be a product of how we manipulate all these variables. However, we also need to consider the amount of time and effort we are willing to dedicate to our workouts each day and throughout the entire week. We can then manipulate these variables to maximize the hypertrophic stimulus within our time constraints. For example, let's say a lifter is trying to maximize muscle growth as a high priority in their life at the current point in time and is willing to train 6 times per week and dedicate up to 90 minutes per session. In this case, they can probably perform more total weekly volume for each muscle group, rest for longer, and select any exercises they think are effective. However, another lifter might only be able to realistically train 3 times per week for 45 minutes on their lunch break from work or school. In this case, they probably won't be able to train with as much volume, rest periods might need to be limited, and exercises might need to be those which are most time efficient. Taking all this information into consideration, how long should your workouts last? Well, rather than structuring training sessions based on time, the session duration is more so a result of other training variables. Variables such as the number of sets performed, rest periods, exercise selection, warm-ups, rep ranges, the implementation of strength or skill training, and cardio will all influence the duration of a workout. These variables can then be manipulated based on how much time and effort you are willing to dedicate to training per session and per week. So instead of prescribing a session duration, it is recommended to prescribe the training variables in a way that allows you to train in a realistic and sustainable time frame. Thanks for watching, and hopefully you got something out of this video. Check out flowhighperformance.com for online coaching, training templates, ebooks, and more.